detailed methodological investigation, and that's ethnography slash participant observation. And so, ethnography is a qualitative research technique that provides the opportunity to study people in real life situations. And so, this is a quote from Malinowski. It was included in the Berger chapter on ethnography. There's a series of phenomena of great importance which cannot possibly be recorded by questioning or computing documents, but have to be observed in their full actuality. Let us call them the imponderabilia of actual life. Here belong such things as the routine of a man's working day, the details of his care of the body, of the manner of taking food and preparing it, the tone of conversational and social life around the village fires, the existence of strong friendships or hostilities, and the passing sympathies and dislikes between people. The subtle yet unmistakable manner in which personal vanities and ambitions are reflected in the behavior of the individual and in the emotional reactions of those who surround him. All these facts can and ought to be scientifically formulated and recorded, but it is necessary that this be done, not by a superficial registration of details, as is usually done by untrained observers, but with an effort at penetrating the mental attitude expressed in them. And so Malinowski is one of the foremost founders of ethnography as a part of anthropological social science. And what he's arguing here is that basically the way we do things in our daily life, our habits, how we shop, how we prepare our food, how we speak, that's very reflective of our orientation, how we think and what we're doing. It tells us something very important about society, and therefore it is worth observing if we want social information. And so the characteristics of ethnography are that it's qualitative. You're using a naturalistic and interpretive paradigm. Observations are carried out in real life situations. So this would be something if you were doing a study of how women make household purchases. And so you perhaps follow women or observe people at the grocery store and see how they make their choices. You know, how long do they spend looking at the pasta aisle before choosing a pasta? What seems to matter to them. When I did my work, my field work in Spain, looking at tourism and food consumption, I spent a lot of time at food festivals, looking at what was served, how it was served, what music was playing, who was there. Was it families? Were it young people, tourists, so on and so forth? And so the researchers become involved in what they are studying. And yet it's important to remember here that the observation is systematic, that you go in with the purpose of observing and looking for these particular things. And so some questions to ask relating to ethics and fieldwork are, do you tell the group that you are studying them? And this becomes a question of concern because you're looking at, you're wondering if there's going to be an observer bias. And so does the observer, does people knowing that they're being observed, is that going to affect the way that they behave? And yet, what are the implications? And I think in the Berger chapter, he provides a few interesting and pretty provocative examples of the difficulties that arise. And so you want to also think about how much you want to participate in the activities you're personally. And so researchers need to maintain a detachment from the community. That's a belief. It's sometimes challenged among qualitative work, but it's a fairly standard principle that you should be detached from the community. There's other types of research that actively cultivate an engagement with the community, such as participant activist research that looks at a lot of community engagement as a way of entering and advocating. And so within critical work, you might find researchers who are still conducting very valid and credible research, but that explicitly want to be part of the community they're studying. And so objectivity is something that's debated within ethnography and by ethnographers. Can you be truly objective? How much of you is just always going to be in there? And within that, then, you have two different types of participants. You have the participant as an observer. So the researcher participates with the group being observed and is a functioning part of the group. So they have an insider understanding of the activities in their meeting. And so that would be kind of a more like you are already part of the community you're looking at. But you also have the observer as participant. And so that structure has the researcher as a neutral outsider who has been allowed to participate for the purposes of their research. And one of the benefits of that is that the researcher is neutral and therefore more balanced in making observations and conclusions. So some things to think about when you're choosing how to conduct your ethnographic work. What is the setting? Is the setting you're in, what's the impact going to be on the behavior and expectations of the participants? For example, if you're in a meeting or a place that has an expectation of anonymity, such as an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting or perhaps various support groups, that's going to have a different set of ethical questions that arise compared to being in a setting such as a pub or a bar or a town hall meeting, where the people attending don't really have any reasonable expectation of privacy. The other question is participants. Who are you observing? How many? Why are they together? Right? Those are questions that'll help guide us to how the space is being used and what the event or situation that you're observing, what the nature of it is. And that's the other question, is the nature and the purpose of the group. Why are they together in this place at this time? How open is the group? Do people casually come and go? Or is it a more formal setting where people meet at an appointed time for an appointed length? So some things when you do your ethnography you want to look at are the behavior of people in the group. What are they doing? How do they do it? How do they interact with each other? The frequencies and durations of the behavior. And some questions. Do some behaviors occur frequently? How long do people spend doing things? How often do they do them? When do they happen? Is there any causation? Does any event lead to a particular outcome? And then you want to record what you see. And you want to record what people actually say and do, and not just your impression of things. Because when you do interpretive work, you need to be able to look back and essentially cite the statements or actions that lead you to the conclusion you've made. And so you want that kind of more objective or banal recording of behavior so that you can later provide the interpretation and give that data meaning. And so one example that's been pretty famous is the book Reading the Romance. And this is one of the first books that took popular culture seriously. And so Janice Radway, a sociologist, was looking at the popularity of Harlequin romance novels. And we're all pretty familiar with them from the supermarket aisles and airports. But they're generally dismissed, and women reading them tend to be thought of, or especially in the 1980s, as not serious, frivolous. And so she thought, there's something going on. This is a very popular genre. It makes a lot of money. Why is this so popular? She started off with the research question, how do readers interpret romance novels? And then from that, she led to the question, how do readers incorporate the novels into their lives? And the second question came about after conducting some preliminary field work. She thought that she discovered that was probably the more interesting question to be asking. And so she went through several different means of looking into that, including questionnaires, tape-recorded interviews, and she found a close informant. And so what she did, she went to a book club among women who read these novels and would get together to discuss them, and then began, through a series of questionnaires, she found people willing to be interviewed, and she wound up even living with the head of the book club for a while. And so she had a very close informant in that person. And so that's one of the most famous academic examples of using popular culture and doing ethnographic research on popular culture and cultural studies. And so one of the things that Radway found was that, she argues in her introduction, the nature of the group's operation suggests that it is unsatisfactory for an analyst to select a sample of romances currently issued by American publishers draw conclusions about the meaning of the form by analyzing the plots of the books in the sample, and then make general statements about the cultural significance of the romance. And what she's taking to task here is a sort of analysis from the top, right? People looking at what the texts themselves say without actually asking anyone who's using who's reading the novel, any fans. And so what she's saying is that we have to talk to the people and ask them what they're doing and what they're about.